The Brewhouse was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery. But the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Our pleasure to have Dan Moriarty, sports talk show host, back extraordinaire.
Thanks for having me. Good
to
be
here.
Good
to see you. Co-hosting Mike Catalana, and in uniform today, Pat Duffy.
This is like my favorite jersey of all time. It is a custom University of Miami football jersey that I got when my 11th birthday. I got this. As you can see by the stains and wear, I wore it like 3 times a week until I was like 17. It's like my favorite thing ever.
And it still fits.
I was a very fat kid.
I mean, that's amazing.
That's a thing. I don't really talk about it.
All right. Well, look, we're approaching July 4th. That's a traditional checkpoint for Major League Baseball. Just broadly, what are you taking away from the season so far?
This season has had tons of storylines off the bat. Your Phillies, NL East in general, when you look at what the Atlanta Braves and the Phillies both ahead of schedule, I think most people thought the Nationals were just kind of run away with that division. Then you look at the American League East, you got 2 50-win teams already with the Yankees and the Red Sox. You might have a 100-win team that makes, the wild card and ends up in a one-game playoff situation in the wild card. And, of course, the Houston Astros coming off the World Series last year. They look like absolute world beaters. That lineup and then that pitching staff is as deep as it gets.
The leagues could hardly be different right now, just in terms of competitiveness. I don't know what to make of the National League.
Yeah, I think it's going to be wide open. It'll be a different kind of race in the National League. Some people don't like what's going on in the American League because it is very top-heavy, and you have those teams. I think it'll be less interesting outside of the Yankees, Red Sox, or who wins the division. But once the playoffs start, even 2 100-win teams, when you've got Houston there too, I mean, who's the favorite going in? It'll probably depend on who has the home field.
And the best of one factor's in there, but also the first playoff round of the survivor of that best round will get either the Yankees or the Red Sox. So it's like, it's not working out the way I don't think that they had it to form.
Well, no, but that's always good, right? Like when something you're not expecting happens, it's good. And the funniest thing all season long to me is, I know everyone overreacts about the Yankees. For this season, it seems like there's way more overreaction than normal. It seems like Yankees fans split off into 2 factions. The realists and the folks that thought they were going to win the World Series, go 147 and whatever and what. They're the greatest team ever, and they're the worst team ever on a weekly basis. And there's nothing in the middle, right? You're seeing these things, right? Aaron Judge graded, what the happened to Aaron Judge? And Giancarlo Stanton, what is going on with Stanton?
Yeah, I mean, it can happen, I think, in part because they're battling with the Red Sox, so they're never pulling away from them. It was kind of comical. You mentioned the Phillies. Nice young core. They're a ways away. They're home for a series. The Yankees come in. It is like rock stars coming in. The place is packed. It is probably 65% Yankees fans taking over the place. And their guys are hitting bombs, mostly in batting practice, but I mean like that had never been seen in that stadium before. They are still a different level, at least to the general part of the league, than anybody else, including the Red Sox, who obviously have a great team.
Yeah, well, they did that to the Nationals. They did it to Seattle. I mean, these are good teams. What the Yankees, do you see them as a clear favorite? Because Vegas does.
Regular season, they look great. When you get into the playoffs, look at Cleveland. Cleveland's in the Central. No one's talking about Cleveland. That pitching staff, built for the playoffs. Astros pitching staff, built for the playoffs. Even the Red Sox, their pitching staff, I think they're built for the playoffs. The Yankees need that number 2 guy. And do they have it on their roster? I don't know. Last year, Tanaka showed up in the postseason. CeCe showed up in the postseason. And that's why they were able to do some damage in the playoffs. But if they don't get that this year, I don't know that they're a postseason team because you can't necessarily bash your way to a title. But like you were saying, I mean, day in and day out, everyone's freaking out when they get swept by the Rays. That's baseball. I mean, crazy stuff happens in baseball. It's such a marathon of a season. That's their first 3-game losing streak of the year. That's crazy.
And they said that went like back to the 30s was the last time a team went that deep into the season without losing 3 in a row. That's how good they are. And then the trade deadline comes up, and that's where the Yankees really get to play their ace.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have depth, certainly hitting depth, but they're going to need that pitching.
All righty, this is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. We'll talk Buffalo Bills next.
The Press Box, brought to you in part by Connors and Ferris, your workers' comp attorneys. Call 262-COMP, C-O-M-P, today.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse, and this portion brought to you by Connors and Ferris. Let me bring my sons into the conversation.
Okay.
They're big Buffalo Bills fans. They live out of town. So every time they come back in and they want to talk football, they're always like, what the heck is going on? Our perspective on the coaching staff and the management of this team being close to it, you and I especially, I made Pat sort of the voice of reason as far as they're concerned, is they don't know what they're doing, and we seem to buy into everything almost to a Belichickian type.
I don't buy into
level.
everything. I've said, and Pat loves to give me a hard time about this, that I do believe they have a plan. And if you look at it, certainly on paper, the plan is taking shape in a case of, they're getting in the systems they want, the players they want, the coaches they want, and they've made a decision on quarterback, at least for the long-term future, which is what your organization, you want them to do. Now, they can do all these things, and if none of these quarterbacks ever work out, and certainly Josh Allen is a nobody, then it's going to fail. I mean, I'm not saying it's that simplistic, but they are putting together the basics of a team.
But it kind of is. If Josh Allen fails, these guys are done, right?
Right, but if Josh Allen isn't going to succeed unless you have a basis for him, unless you have a team, and I don't mean a finished team, but I mean you have a program built around him and players are buying into what they're going to do. I mean, my expectations are they're going to win less games than they did last year and miss the playoffs. They're going to get Josh Allen ready, and in 2 years, they're going to start to be the team in terms of challenging. That's when Allen is playing and playing at what they hope would be a high level. But I think this year they take a step back record-wise.
Okay, funny thing about plans, Mike boy. Funny thing. When it all works out, that was a plan. When it doesn't work out, well, we were kind of working with things to see what happened. I guarantee you, this is a Pat Duffy guarantee, so you know that's solid, right? And you know how much I love the Bills, so I don't want this to happen. But if something goes sideways, there was never a plan. It was never part of the plan. We were sitting back and we were waiting for things to come to us. Because you hear Bean say that every once in a while. We're sitting back and we're waiting for things to come to us when something happens that you don't see coming down the line. I don't think there's a plan. Somebody needs to come up with a plan, because when you are opening up minicamp with Nate Peterman getting the starting snaps, Bean, McDermott, they're smart guys. They know what people are going to take that as.
And what impresses me is that they started the process to get Josh Allen when they traded Sammy Watkins.
Watkins, yeah. They traded him, and they did. And the only one of those moves they've made that's been out of the ordinary there was bringing in Kelvin Benjamin. And you look at where they are in a year, I will say this, and this is what Brandon Beane's been doing. He went in, he got his draft pick, he got his quarterback, he got his linebacker. Next year, they go in with tons of cap room and 9 draft picks. That's how you build a franchise.
Danny, how much rope will he get from Bills fans and, just generally? Because we're buying into it right now for the most part.
Well, that's a good question for Duffy with the way he's freaking out over there. I don't mind that these guys weren't afraid to potentially take a step back, knowing that they needed to take a leap forward. Tyrod Taylor wasn't going to get you any further than he got you last year. And I think that's why when you look at the macro perspective, in such a quarterback-driven league, when you look at how the national media perceives the Buffalo Bills, they're like, man, they just traded the guy that got him to the postseason. Yeah. They got rid of Tyrod Taylor. The national media looks at Tyrod Taylor way differently than people who watch that guy every single day.
Because they don't watch the Bills play.
But that's exactly it. If you want to make the postseason on a yearly basis and try and win Super Bowls, he wasn't going to be that guy.
But I just find it funny, right? You're right about the national media and this the narrative on Tyrod that he's not going to be the guy for you. But on the other hand, you now have all of these local sports writers, Rochester, Buffalo, and fans going, well, Josh Allen's the guy. How many Josh Allen plays did you see other than you two before we drafted the guy? Nobody knows about Josh Allen locally, just like national folks don't know about Tyrod Taylor. Right. Don't you patronize me.
No, I'm not going to patronize.
No one knows that about Allen.
Nobody knows that. Here's what it is. They're having faith in the coach and the general manager.
It's amazing what 12 months get you, Mike.
Well, and that's what I mean about how much rope does he wind up with.
Yeah. I mean, okay, you're going to kill me when I say this, but I'm going to go to the Eagles. And I'm going to say Howie Roseman was a guy that people were excited when he got exiled out of that because Chip Kelly was going to take over. Chip Kelly came in, was a disaster. Roseman comes back. Okay, fine. Why is this guy back? Comes in. They end up making the deal. They end up getting Carson Wentz. and they bring in Doug Peterson. It's like, Doug Peterson. And when Carson Wentz is the guy, everybody looks good. The plan was to get him, but when the plan works out, and now there is faith in the coach and the general manager.
I remember watching him win the Super Bowl, holding the trophy over his head.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House. This portion brought to you by Connors and Ferris. Like It or Not is next.
Here's the Press Box trivia question, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Here's the Press Box trivia answer, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390.
Welcome back. This is the Rochester Press Box. We are presented by the Genesee Brew House. Like it or not, the National Hockey League draft, what seemed to me was very European tilt.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, the NHL goes to the NHL goes to these ebbs and flows where they get into something and then everybody wants to do it. Right now, it's speed. Remember back in the day, Mike, it was that devil's trap, and then everybody tried to find players that could run the trap. So the Swedes are working for the NHL because Eastern European hockey is faster than American hockey. Yet, you don't want to take Russians in the draft because you have their rights for fewer amount of years, and they have an option to go play in the KHL, which you're going to lose them, no good. The Swedes, on the other hand, are very excited to come play in the NHL. They want to play in America. So it is a way to get faster traditionally with players that are excited to play North American hockey.
Now, you hate Canada and you hate Russia. Yeah. How are you on Sweden?
Love Sweden. Yeah, how do you not love 3 Rasmuses? That's a Rasmine, Mike.
Oh, there you go. They're all
Does anyone have insight as to why Sweden is... They had 6 in the first round. Why Sweden is...
I think Pat's right. It's
producing?
The skill... Once, broken clock twice a day, right? He's right. I think it's the skill level, and I think it translates well into the current game.
Right? Hey, we got Darlene. That's about all I know. and that's all that matters to me. The idea that the Sabres got that number 1 pick. The other thing about hockey is the way that they're able to target these guys that are going to be absolute studs, and they seem to nail it every single time. Well, they knew about Sidney Crosby before he was in the NHL. He's lived up to the hype. Like, in other sports, we get all this hype, and these guys don't often live up to the hype. Matthews has been a stud for Toronto. We've seen it with McDavid. We've seen it with Eichel.
Sure, but for every Eichel, McDavid, and there you have your Alexander Daigs and your David Legwans. And I mean, yeah, they miss a ton in the top 10 in the NHL.
If they didn't miss, it would be
number
any
1,
fun.
though. When it's like a bona fide absolute stud.
Yeah.
Like the year that Reinhart went, no one was talking like those guys were going to be unbelievable.
Okay, yeah, I guess I see what
But
you're saying.
when they were comparing McDavid to Gretzky and these sort of guys, and so far not that he's going to be Gretzky, but you can see the level of skill and talent that McDavid has.
Okay, I mean Lindros.
Yeah.
Michael, like it or not, the NFL top 100 player vote, Tom Brady number 1, but only 2 quarterbacks among the top 7.
I think the players, they like to be asked for the vote because they want to think they know better, and that's why I don't think they always go. They would think fans and media would go more to quarterbacks. I never understand these votes. If it's about last season, I mean, obviously Brady was great, MVP season, and Wentz was 3rd. He was on his way to that till he got hurt. But then you got like Aaron Rodgers at 10. I think it was just a going away present to Tom Brady.
Oh, really?
You don't think so? Players want to say great career as he goes off into the sunset.
You can have the Eagles Super Bowl. The guy threw for 500 yards in defeat in that game.
Wow. Yeah.
They got to get something. There.
All I remember is him turning it over at the end. That's all I remember.
I hate you so much. This is the Rochester Press Box.
David Ortiz.
Presented by the Genesee Brew House. Unfinished Business is next.
Here is the MVP Experience Stat of the Week, brought to you by Sport Clips, where it's good to be a guy. No appointment ever needed.
Ice cream-inspired iced coffee is here at Dunkin' in the flavors you love. Cookie dough, pistachio, and butter pecan. What's your flavor? America runs on Dunkin'.
Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. This is Unfinished Business, brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Pat.
We were just talking about the NHL a second ago and the Buffalo Sabres, how fast they transform, not in terms of wins or losses, but the team period. As we speak, Ryan O'Reilly may be traded. They've been trying to deal him for the last couple of weeks, and this team has gotten young and fast quick. Rasmus Dahlin will be on this roster starting. Your elder statesman could be Jack Eichel playing with Sam Reinhart and Evan Rodriguez and Brendan Gooley and a kid in Dahlin that's just 18 years old. I mean, you look around that roster, there aren't many guys over the age of 25, and that's actually the way that the NHL is moving. It's good for the Sabres. It's also awesome for Amerks fans because Jason Bottrill, the general manager, along with Chris Taylor, current Amerks head coach, need to find a proving ground for these guys that they can move fast enough, and they're going to be moving fast, not only on the ice, but up to playing for the Buffalo Sabres, because there's no more time to wait. You have to make sure these guys can play, and if they can go, you're going to send them quick. It'll be the first time in the last 15 years that you're going to be able to sit back and watch hockey players in Rochester that will eventually develop into big-time NHL role players or even stars. And I, for one, am very excited to be spending some time at the Blue Cross Arena.
Excellent. They're trying to temper expectations. I mean, is there any chance the Sabres turn themselves into a playoff team this year?
Well, that's what's so funny. Like, anything can happen now. Yeah. If these guys find a way to play together, you're golden. It could also go terribly, terribly wrong because they're all young kids.
And that's where they have to be careful, and that's where bringing in some of these veterans may help. For a guy like Casey Middlestat, immensely talented guy they have high hopes for, he could end up starting with the Amerks just because they have so many young guys up there, but then quickly get himself back up to the NHL team. Now, I'm saying that way before training camp starts. He could look like he fits right away. But they're going to have to balance the roster with some, and I say old guys, late 20s guys, not necessarily older players because they got so many kids.
Danny Boy.
New York Yankees, we talked about them earlier in the show, built to bash their way through this regular season, but can they win in the playoffs? Last year they did because Tanaka stepped up and so did CC Sabathia. Can you count on those guys this year? Now, the Yankees have talked about how any year they don't win a World Series is a failure. If that's really the situation that Brian Cashman and the Yankees are in, with the way this team is built right now and the way they're going to perform in the regular season, they need to go out and get themselves a number 2 starter in order to compete against the Houston Astros, the Boston Red Sox, and the Cleveland Indians. This might be the most important move that Cashman makes in rebuilding this Yankee team. He's done a fantastic job so far through the draft, through trades, obviously with Gleyber Torres, getting Aroldis Chapman back in free agency. They've done a great job rebuilding this team. The one missing piece is getting themselves a number 2 starter that can help them win in the postseason. Do they panic and give up somebody big in order to do it? We've seen so many of these Sonny Grays, Carl Pavanos, Javier Vasquez's, all these guys through the years. Going out and getting a pitcher to pitch in New York isn't a guarantee. Who are they willing to give up in order to try and get that guy?
First Carl Pavano reference ever made on this show.
I've seen way too many of these guys come into New York being the next guy, and very, very few have lived up to those expectations.
We get an opportunity. We talked about the Yankees see Giancarlo Stanton come from Miami, where he was a baseball star, to New York, where he could become a superstar, right? Because people are watching, they'll watch the Yankees. And I'm going to make it a little bit of an East Coast bias here, because I'm going to talk about another guy, Mike Trout. Mike Trout is phenomenal. He's probably the best player in all of baseball, best all-around player, should be a sports superstar. He's not. And I know he's in Los Angeles, the Angels out there. He's on the West Coast. 2/3 of the nation doesn't see many of their games because they're on the West Coast. So that is an East Coast bias. At some point, I want to see the Angels send him east. It could be to Boston. It could be to the Yankees. He's from near Philly. It could be there. It could be to one of the teams, Washington, somewhere on the eastern side. Because I think Mike Trout, not that he's wasting his career out west, but you think about it. Ask baseball fans. Ask anybody you know who follows the sport. He's a guy that, it's amazing to think about, can sometimes get forgotten about because he puts up the numbers, doesn't have the support around him, and he's playing out west where most people don't see him play.
It's funny how West takes a back seat in all that stuff.
But if you
know?
think about it, a West Coast fan sees what goes on in the East much more than an East Coast fan sees what goes on in the West, especially in a long baseball season. You don't see it as much. It's not like the NFL where you see the players Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock on a regular basis. So I want to see Trout at some point come east.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business, brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. Danny, thank you. Nice to see you again.
Good to be here.
Guys, as always, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week with the Rochester Press Box.